Imagine you're standing on a sand dune near the beach with the wind in your hair on a beautiful sunny day. And then you decide to run down this dune full speed. And then as you start gaining momentum, your feet leave the ground and you start to rise 5, 10, 15, 20 feet into the air, and you realize you're soaring like a bird. And you can see the ocean glittering in the distance. And it's a beautiful moment. And then you start settling down to the ground, and you push on this metal bar in front of you, and your feet gently rest on the ground. This has been my experience the first time I went hang gliding in near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, where the Wright brothers also did their first glider tests as they prepared for their first powered, controlled, and sustained flight in an aircraft. The Wright brothers built upon the knowledge of early aviation enthusiasts and solved all the problems to make powered, controlled, and sustained flight possible. This culminated in the invention of the Wright Flyer, which was the first aircraft built that could safely carry passengers from flat, level ground up into the sky and back down again. In this speech, I will be covering that flying and invention was a passion the Wright brothers had their whole lives. The Wright brothers built many glider prototypes and a wind tunnel to test the designs and control the aircraft in all 3 spatial planes, which it means to roll the aircraft, pitch the aircraft up and down, and to control yaw, which is the left to right motion of an aircraft, and be able to control the flight. And then finally, once they completed all of this, they were able to have a powered, controlled, and sustained flight in an aircraft and carrying a person on December 17th, 1903 in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. So the passion and excitement for flying started for the Wright brothers, as it did for me when they were children. They were given a toy helicopter from their father, and it sparked their imagination at an early age. This led to kite flying, and as they became adults, shifted into invention. The Wright brothers were successful printers and printing press and bicycle builders, which was the foundation for their foray into building airplanes. Their ability to build and sell quality bicycles and printing presses is what funded their pursuit of aviation from 1899 to 1905. This I found in the Encyclopedia Britannica webpage on the Wright brothers. So after reading almost everything available on aviation in the late 1800s, the Wright brothers realized they only needed to refine what was already known. One of their first aviation inventions was a box kite that could be twisted to create wing warping that resulted in the ability to control the roll of an aircraft. So it would actually twist like a box. You can use like a shoebox or something and twist it, and you can get this wing warping that is the same way the birds control their flight. They twist their wings to fly. And this was found on the National Parks Service website that's dedicated to the Wright Brothers National Memorial, another great source. So this wing warping design was incorporated into the design of their first glider in 1900. This was controlled by a hip harness that they actually laid in on the aircraft, and they would push their hips to the left or to the right, and it would actually cause this twisting and warping with wires that they had found or built in to control and make this box kite box plane to do this twisting motion and allow it to roll. So they took this glider from Dayton, Ohio, their home, where they built it, to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, which they actually had chose after contacting the National Weather Service, because it had consistent winds, tall sand dunes, and it was isolated. So they were able to set up their operations and build a camp in nearby Kill Devil Hill, and which is very close to Kitty Hawk. And the Wright brothers' genius soon became apparent as they focused on a flying machine that was relying on pilot control, not inherent stability and power as was being done by other inventors at the time, trying to make airplanes, trying to figure this problem out. And in Wright's own words, it is possible to fly without motors, but not without knowledge and skill. Because they were sending up people just in these large airplanes with powers, and you may be seeing these old videos where there's aircraft that are making these weird, crazy movements, and they would just turn it on and send it off with somebody in it, and who knows what would happen. It would crash, and nobody had any control, and it was a mess. And so they solved further design problems over time, and they also attached a horizontal elevator, which they controlled with a lever as they laid there on the plane, and that controlled the up and down motion of the aircraft and helped them flow up and come back down. And but after several failures and crashes, they realized it wasn't working, and discouraged, they went back home to Dayton and back to the drawing board to figure out what to do. At this point, the Wright brothers realized they were working with bad data. They had been looking at these books that they had read and all these charts and things, and they had to go back and make it all themselves. They had to figure it all out themselves. So they actually built a wind tunnel and to test these different wing designs and change the shape of the wing and how much it was curved and what the tips of the wings looked like, and changing it so that it would fly. And when they had finally got done with all this and all these different testings and pulling kites with their bikes and different things they were trying to do to test this before going back out to Kitty Hawk and risking their lives, they figured out a lot of these problems, and they built another glider, and in 1902 they went back out to Kitty Hawk, and they also included one other portion, which was a dual tail that had stiff rudders that would control this left to right motion. That actually is very important to have controlled flight. And so they started doing flights with it, and they realized that it wasn't quite working. The stiff tail didn't do enough to correct it. So they actually ended up going back to a single rudder that actually was connected to the wires that controlled the twisting of the wings, and it controlled this rudder and allowed it to turn the same direction as the twisting, and allowed this controlled turns that is a major element of controlled flight. And so then with this done, and all the problems solved really of flight, they have done this. They did over 1,000 glides from Big Kill Devil Hill, and the Wrights made themselves the first true pilots. These flying skills were a crucial component of their invention. Before they ever attempted power flight, the Wright brothers were masters of the air, and this was described on the National Park Service website that was on the Wright Brothers National Monument. Now that all that was left was powering the craft. And so the Wright brothers went home again to Dayton one more time to figure out this last big problem. And they enlisted the help of their machinist colleague, Charles Taylor, who worked in their bicycle shop. And they worked together to build a small, lightweight 4-cylinder engine. And they also used the wind tunnel again to develop 2 propellers that were connected to bicycle chains and to the engines, and they would counter-rotate so they wouldn't cause more problems with flying. And they put this all together and were able to figure it out. And after a couple little bumps again, they took it back out and to Kitty Hawk, and they were able to get it up and running, and tried a couple of flights. The propeller broke. They ended up having to make metal ones, kind of one problem after another. And but when finally on December 17th, 1903, they were able to put their aircraft on this guided monorail without any wheels to allow it to control smoothly on the sandy ground, and fire up the engines and get the plane into motion. And in that iconic picture that probably many of you have seen, I'll try to have one here. You see the plane rising off the ground, and their first successful powered, controlled, and sustained flight in an aircraft. And they actually did several flights that same day, 4 flights in increasing lengths, and I think the last one was about 800 feet, and they were into the history books as the first people to solve all the problems of flying and make it work. And it was must have been an amazing moment to be there to see that, even though there was only a few people in attendance, and there was a bunch of other people working on the same thing, and people that maybe didn't even know or believe that it was being done by them, or these bicycle makers from Dayton, Ohio. But they did it, and they made it happen, and they became the first true aviation experts, and built some of the first aircrafts and started aviation in earnest. So thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed my lecture.